Act, there was other legislation to ban other AAPI groups from immigrating to the United States. And it wasn't until 1943 that Chinese immigrants and American born families could be eligible for citizenship. So there are times when people will ask, well, go back to your country. Why did you come here? But America's prosperity was built on the back of Chinese laborers and other AAPIs and Black people, Native people. And historically, the same laws that were used to prevent Black and Native Americans from actually owning property and achieving power were used to then disenfranchise AAPIs. Next slide, James. So Philadelphia Chinatown actually has its roots in a person named Li Fang who fled anti-Chinese racism on the West Coast. He opened up his laundry at 913 Race Street in 1870. After World War II, churches, businesses, social and cultural organizations were established in Philadelphia Chinatown to improve neighborhood life, preserve Chinese culture, and provide services to growing numbers of immigrants. And then hundreds of Philadelphia Chinatown residents have been displaced due to government projects like the Vine Street Expressway, Pennsylvania Convention Center, and Independence Mall. Later in this presentation, you're going to hear from Shirley about her family's experience. And to the right, you do see a picture of the bulldozer, the crane, reaching over a pile of rubble, but on top, Chinatown residents perched on top to protect, Chinatown. All right, turn it back to you, James.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's really powerful, to understand that history and that, this story, and this is where the conflict rises because there's always this separation, right? They're trying to create these separate silos of people groups so that collective action is stymied. And so that's just which makes it really difficult for us. So really quickly, I'm going to dash through some of these other parts just because we want to get to here Shirley's story, and we want to get to the conversational piece towards the end. And so you all know World War II was a huge thing. And after World War II, the Great Depression and everything, there's a lot of need to rebuild the nation. And so the president at the time and the administration created several policies to make that happen. And these policies, so the Homeowners Loan Act, created different effects in our society. And over time, there were more policies created, like the Housing Act of 1949, which talked about a standard of housing, in 1954, which created the Urban Renewal program. And urban renewal is simply allowing cities to take land on the behalf of, under the guise of revitalizing it. And so that really did a huge number on neighborhoods across the country. And Philly has huge swaths of it that were taken in urban renewal. But of course, some of the laws began to change in 1965, which was started to look at some equal rights of housing, and some more affordable housing came in. Same thing with 68. And of course, HUD was created and looked at replacing some of the old structures and with federal dollars. And in the block grant program, which funds a lot of CDC work, community development work today, was created in 74. But all these laws come together to create community, right? To create the landscape that we see today. And so what you need to know is that just like those laws were created then to establish what we see today, we can recreate those laws and policies to recreate our community, to get a different impact. And so one of the huge residual effects of a lot of those policies, which is taken forever to unwind and still is not done yet, and not even close to being undone yet, is the redlining effect. And while Chinatown isn't essentially redlined, we know that the redlining issue, just like it affected communities outside of Chinatown, still served as a tool to marginalize the Chinese community within Chinatown. Anna talked about the different acts that excluded Chinese Americans from owning property. And then also, it also hemmed Chinese Americans into a community. You make lemonade out of lemons, right? But in an industrialized community that was not necessarily the best residential context, but now it's a wonderful, wonderful place in Philadelphia. So redlining, of course, the different colors, if you see the different color maps, red, green, yellow. Redlining was the area that was excluded from financing. And so green meaning good, blue meaning okay, yellow meaning is on the downside, and red meaning don't go there. And most of the time, those red communities were Black, were brown, were Jewish immigrants, and were Asian Americans. And so here's a little closer look at some of the legend that's on the map, so you can see exactly the details of it. And this is largely enacted by HUD primarily, and then the Redevelopment Authority. Some of the redlining issues where they really started to get the benefit. And so here you can see where Chinatown is located, right in the middle of an urban renewal area, which allowed the government to do massive amounts of eminent domain in that area, which is how we got the convention center and Vine Street Expressway and things like that. And here's another map that the Redevelopment Authority and Planning Commission created, which is an idea really, but a lot of this has gotten done. And you can see the arrow points to the Vine Street Expressway, which was something that they planned so long ago. So, I know there was there still is a Save Chinatown movement. And the question is, how is it still happening today, and what role might you play in the movement going forward? If I can get like one person, maybe.
Hey, James, quick question.
Yeah.
Were you planning to have Shirley talk about her experience in that previous slide, or can't recall if that was
Yes.
Yes.
forward? Okay,
Sure.
good.
There you go.
Make
So
sure we all
Shirley,
have that.
please take it away. I apologize for moving too fast.
No worries. So my family did have houses on Chinatown in the 1960s. So we actually had 3 households in a row. And Cecilia Moy Yap actually was our neighbor. My father, George Moy, was a neighbor. And so my grandmother had bought those houses. And then in 1960s, it was taken over for eminent domain because of the Vine Street Expressway. And so what that did is forced our family to relocate to North Philadelphia at 2nd and Diamond. And so we had to move out of our community, our ethnic community, but I can't say enough. I love North Philadelphia. So please, I really enjoyed my experience growing up in North Square and going to school there and having a differently diverse population of Black and brown people. And we were the only Asian family in that community. But it did displace my family from that. I would say, growing up, I became, my circle of friends were not Asian then. And so that we became disconnected from that community, even though we are very proud about being Chinese. And my father, is a diehard Chinatown advocate and all that stuff. But I would say the generation underneath him, all his children, including myself, that there was a serious disconnection from that community. And so luckily I got to be, where I am now and recover, I guess, you have I guess the houses that were built on Spring Street. Is that is that what this is called? Yeah. So my aunt, who was also displaced during the 1960s, was able to purchase one of those houses in the 1970s. And then she lived there till her death, which was about a few years ago. And luckily I was able to, that was inherited by my father. And then I was able to purchase it from my father's estate. So come full circle, I'm happy to be back in Chinatown. But I think the displacement did cause harm to my family, even though there's a silver lining to everything.
Thanks for sharing, Shirley. And I also wanted to note that you referred to the replacement housing that your aunt and then George and now you're living in. And there's a number of developments throughout the community which were built as replacement housing for many of the displaced families from various projects across the years, including Vine Street Expressway. But of course, not sufficient to replace all the folks that were pushed out, including the renters and of course the businesses that were pushed out of the neighborhood. And of course, we know in recent years, it's become increasingly hard to develop affordable housing. And so that sort of one-for-one replacement has become impossible.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Shirley. So we're going to skip ahead a little bit and talk about what makes it really hard to do some of this work in communities in terms of building affordable housing and stuff. And it's all about the banks, is the short way to say it. The banks really work supported by the federal government in order to help communities, right? And this is the way it should work. Money from the government to the banks, banks make the loans, and to the community, communities are able to build the housing that is required to create affordability, support the businesses, so on and so forth. But of course, you know, profit is king. And so the banks are figuring out ways of short circuiting it. You know, they're not making the loans in certain areas, and they're also funding predatory activities that then depletes the tax base, and then money goes right back into the bank system as opposed to the federal government. Sorry, people knocking. And so, you know, gentrification is like a real thing. And gentrification is happening in many ways in different communities. And I know that, you know, on the north side of Vine Street, gentrification is really difficult for Chinatown community, but also on the south side, of course, you know, but just in terms of private gentrification coming in and taking away some of that fabric that could become more residential area, more business space for the Chinese community, it's a real thing happening across Philadelphia. And it has led to all kinds of displacement. And you need to remember that it was a purposefully done thing. And so when people talk about creating new affordable housing, you should be your choice, but we need to advocate for more affordable housing, regardless of how much it reduces the cash benefit to banks or the economic system, because of the way that things have been manipulated over the years. And so just to let you know what we mean by affordable housing, the real standard is that no one should be paying more than 30% of their income towards housing costs. If you're paying more than 30%, that means that the rent's too high. The mortgage is too high, and that should be figured out. So where is the power? So this is a quick run through of where the power is. Of course, you know the governmental structure, the governor, the senator, Casey, and Toomey, who's now gone out. There's Congressman Evans. There's Nikki Saval, who's your state senator. There's Isaacson, who's your state rep. And then there's these local council people at large, which, you know, of course, Philadelphia has a strong district model, which is challenging, but you need to see these council people at large as your consultants. So in terms of your policy advocacy work, they might not be able to get things done for you, but they will be able to open up the doors. They will be able to open up the books and help you to understand how different areas function. And of course, we all know Squilla. Squilla's our guy. Right? But you might think to go to Squilla for everything, but you'll talk to Squilla and his staffers and all that stuff. But really, to get policy work done, you need to dig into the department. So here's the mayor's structure, right? And this looks daunting. This looks intimidating. It's like a spider web. It's all over the place. But if you look closer to where the circle is, this is transit, MOTU, or Otis, right? Otis is the name now. And it's not a spider web. It's like a sweater. You just start pulling on that thread. You just pull on that thread and you can unravel that whole thing and you can get your policy work done, right? It's not as easy as I'm making it seem in this quick 5-second thing, but there is a pathway, and that's what you really need to hold on to. So Otis is, if you're thinking about the way that crossing Vine Street is a thing and how difficult it is and how you might make it easier and more pedestrian friendly, and even one day capping Vine Street, this is where you start with Otis. And you can start with these two individuals because they're responsible for communicating with you and people on the ground to get that information out, Casey and Andrew. And you can even invite them to your community meetings. I know that you have already, but these are people that you want to just kind of hound and pick with. And you want to kind of ask, where should you be looking for more information? They might say, look at our strategic transportation plan. Look at who owns the streets, help them to do their homework. So you study this plan and you say in the plan, you said XYZ, this is what neighbors are saying. How do we connect the dots on that, And so call Casey, call Andrew, hound them. And there are many other departments that you might do that with. Could be the PRA, the land bank, whatever. You just call Angel, hound Angel, ask him to come out, ask him to come to a restaurant or walk the streets with you or come to an event or something, but make friends so that you can make laws, you know? And so now I'm going to swing to Anna, and she's going to talk about the PATCO case study and how you can get this done.
Hey, Anna, maybe you could start off by answering Josh's question in the chat, which is how do you actually call or talk to a congressman or a transit planner or whoever it is that your target is?
Great. Well, that's a great question, Joshua. I think, like those old school cartoons or, documentaries about how government works, it can be very intimidating. You feel like you need to have like a law degree, right? Or a master's in public planning. But in reality, when you think about it, these elected officials work for us. So you as a voter, you as a resident living in their district means you have a right to ask them questions. And, I think oftentimes I hear from community members, oh, I don't know enough about this topic. I'm not qualified to speak about it. So I'm going to take you through this Franklin Square PATCO case study just to give you an example about how, everyday residents can have an impact. And I do see James is trying to load this presentation. So just give us 1 second here.
Hey, listen, I don't know what's going on, but
Okay.
if it doesn't work, you can just.
I can do the screen share then.
Yeah, because I don't want to hold it up.
Okay.
But what Anna's saying is right on the money. These people work for you, and they're regular people, believe it or not. They eat same kinds of food. They go to the same kinds of religious institutions. They actually wear the same shoes. They're not fancy people.
And, I think former First Lady Michelle Obama, once described in her book, Becoming, about how she once realized that when she was in a room with people that they were not any smarter than she was, so that's something to think about. So I guess, James, okay, you got it, James.
Yeah, let's
Perfect.
see.
All right, so we're going to show you a little bit about Franklin's. Psych.
I'm gonna do it outside of the. I'm just gonna leave it in. If this works, let's see.
Yeah, and if you want, you can give me share screen power, and then I can share the presentation.
That's perfect. I don't know how to do. Sarah, can you give her? Who's the?
So I will share now.
Can you share?
Yep, perfect. Okay, so we're just gonna go all the way down. Thanks for bearing with us. So Franklin Square PATCO station, this terrible train station has actually been around for many times, and I can see Joshua laughing. To the right, you can see a map of this proposed, sort of regional plan. This document appears in the Philadelphia 2035 Central District Plan, and it was apparently, created through input from residents, although not all residents knew about these meetings. And Shirley's nodding her head vigorously. So as some of you may know, Franklin Square Park is our only sort of nearest green space. And for a long time, due to public disinvestment, it had turned into what they called Skid Row, a place where there were people who were really living in high poverty who didn't have homes used to congregate there. And over time, it really fell into a state of disrepair. And that was Chinatown's like only green space. And I've talked to residents that said, I remember growing up there and my parents wouldn't even let me go to the park because it was dangerous. So Franklin Square PATCO is a train station that sits at the edge of the park. And you can kind of see my mouse here. For many years, government has tried to open this train station connecting Philadelphia to southern New Jersey. It has been open, 4 times at least, according to historical records, operational for only 10 years, and each time costing millions of dollars. And meanwhile, today, the nearest PATCO station is at 8th and Market, only 3 blocks away. And the Delaware River Port Authority completed feasibility studies in 2005, 2009, and in 2015. So there, have been prior attempts, each time government spending extensive amounts of money to try to examine, how do we build this? How do we fund this? How do we get this going again? Now, if you look at news coverage of this project in recent years, it was very positive. It's like, this is going to bring in jobs. And, in particular, there were certain political characters such as John Doherty and other folks who talked about how building this train station or reopening it would bring so many jobs to this impoverished community, and we should absolutely invest the money. So in 2018, the DRPA unveiled to its board new plans for a larger glass head house, costing about $30 million. And they said, well, this is the only way for us to achieve the Americans with Disabilities Act accessibility. And so they were proposing this new station. For us, residents pointed out that constructing this train station, which had dubious, benefits for residents and workers, because we couldn't really think of, what jobs were they coming to in the area of Franklin Square. We started to articulate who would actually be harmed by this proposal. So local residents, for whom Franklin Square is our only green space, 2,500 children who visit the park daily from nearby K-8 and early childhood education programs, 5,000 citywide school children who participate in Historic Philadelphia's full day trip program, which they offer for free, and disrupt 80 free community events held at the park, including ones planned with PCDC. So, we started out first by just asking nicely, like, hey, can you tell us a little more about this project? Because, some of us weren't aware of these other meetings, and, we're not able to go to the Camden meetings that the DRPA holds. And this was before Zoom took everything over, right? So they were saying, well, you have to come down to Camden if you want to actually find out what we're talking about. So in September 25th, 2019, we formally reached out to Councilmember Squilla to just ask, could our community please have a meeting so that we can ask some questions and have some input? On October 25th, DRPA responded, we're not having any more meetings scheduled for the rest of 2019. And we'll be in touch with you to let you know when we want to have a meeting. Well, this wasn't acceptable to any of us. So I actually filed a formal request through Right to Know to ask for the feasibility study so I could read what it was in those past, studies costing $500,000 each that told the government this is a terrible idea. Now remember, there's 3 studies, right? On December 20th, I finally got copies of those studies. And on that night, PCDC, Congressmember Dwight Evans, Councilmember Mark Squilla hosted a community meeting at Crane Community Center. And there we had Cecilia Moyet speak very powerfully about how the Chinatown community has been asking for a cap over the Vine Street Expressway. And we've always been told there's no money. And yet there's apparently $30 million for a project that nobody really wants. So after the meeting, we did follow up and say, could we get some answers to more questions about how much green space are they taking? When are they planning to open this and construct this? Because none of us knew. They didn't respond. So on January 13th, we had found out that PATCO was hosting a community meeting, except it was not posted publicly anywhere. So we galvanized, we got our residents there. I also invited McCall Elementary School families that also use the park. So we had also non-Asian residents and voters for these elected officials show up and support our community's demands for more transparency and equity. Just to make things interesting, I live tweeted the event and recorded the statements that they were making to document some of their responses to our questions. And then later, January 16th, WHYY reported on the meeting, amplifying our concerns. So that way the concerns weren't just contained to the groups that were working on this issue. It became a more public issue. So what are some of the things that the community was asking for?
Hey, Anna, going back to the previous slide, I just wanted to connect your narrative to that question about how do you first establish the relationship. Can you talk about what was your relationship with Squilla's office prior? Who did you reach out to? And then how did you know from DRPA and PACO's side, how did you know who to reach out to there, and or did you go through somebody? Can you talk about that process?
Sure thing. So, I've lived in Chinatown and Councilmember Squilla since 2008. I didn't always have a very close relationship with him. However, after I became a parent to two children with disabilities, and I was hearing from a lot of Chinatown families, they were having issues. That's when I started to contact Councilmember Squilla. Now, at the time, Councilmember Squilla said, well, disability isn't really my area. You should contact so and so, right? But after, Sarah Young and I actually got readers to upvote a question that we had asked. So I don't know if you remember this, Sarah, but the question that we had
Yeah, I
submitted
do.
for this like citywide poll was, if every neighborhood matters, which is Mayor Kenny's whole slogan, how come Chinatown was not on the map for rebuild funds? So when Rebuild Philadelphia, the soda tax funded initiative, and we're paying soda tax here, by the way, when they announced their eligible sites, I opened the map and there was not one dot on Chinatown as an eligible site. And so Sarah and I tried to get answers to that. And when we didn't get answers either from the city or through city council, we decided to have readers upvote that question. And then Plan Philly, I believe, then reported on it. So they went to city government and asked them, will you answer this question now? So that galvanized Councilmember Squilla saying, I really need to now meet with my constituent, because at the time he was not necessarily responsive, but he started to say, okay, now readers and other residents have upvoted this. Now it's time for me to start working on these issues. So that was the nature of my relationship, getting to know Councilmember Squilla. So first, I was probably like an antagonist, but over time, what I described to Sarah is I wore him down. But now he has really started to see the issues that we're having with accessibility, in particular for our Chinatown residents who have disability. So he has also been a powerful ally, supporting us on these issues. But when it came time to this PATCO project, however, where everyone was saying this is going to be an economic benefit, people need jobs, I think it was a difficult situation for him, because as a city council member, this isn't something his office has jurisdiction over. However, he was someone who could help connect us and say, who do I need to talk to at DRPA? And PCDC was just an invaluable resource and partner in this fight, because PCDC is the representative community organization. So when it comes to community planning, that entity has a lot of power. Developers do need to listen. So they might, blow off Anna Pern, resident in Chinatown, but they kind of need the approval and support of the representative community organization. So we kind of tag team, but we also built out our coalition to include other stakeholders. So including residents from Callow Hill, Old City, just to really make sure that we had more voters to put
So it's
pressure.
not just Anna, even though Anna is the champion in this instance. Anna has built a coalition or a team to back her up. So you might not all be able to make the phone calls or to do the research, but you can certainly pack the room. When Anna calls, you can pack the room. And so that's how these things get done. And then also Anna has a list of community needs, right? You can also help to fill out those community needs.
That's right. So these community needs were just, points that residents brought up at the Crane community meeting, right? So we had a diverse cross section of stakeholders who care about what happens. So that way it's not only Chinatown residents, it's everyone who uses the park, who needs to use the park. So as you can see, there are diverse needs and also recommendations, PACO's initial design was, we're building a train station and you guys are stuck kind of cleaning it by yourselves. We're not going to put a bathroom in our train station, so they're going to be using your park bathroom. And for the, folks like Carol Wong, who has a preschool that visits, she just said that's a nightmare. That's just going to really kind of ruin the amenities at the park. So, there were other recommendations like improving the drainage and greenery. So why not, if you're going to go kind of construct in that area, why not help us upgrade some of the amenities that really benefit the community? And how about, helping to support the businesses, advertise on the train, right? Make sure that if people are riding through Chinatown, that we have, ads for our restaurants or special promotions so they actually stop in our community and support our local businesses.
Right.
So, yeah, so I'm going to move on.
So
So
I'm sorry, and I want to cut you short for a second because we want to get to the session where part of the session where we do that collective brainstorming again about interests and stuff like that.
Gotcha. So I just wanted to close out by mentioning that our community tour was before the pandemic. So that's where we organized all these different organizations: PCDC, Chinatown Learning Center, Unlock House, Chinese Christian Church and Center, Franklin Square Park. We actually organized a tour so that PATCO and other planning officials could actually walk through our community and see the things that we were experiencing. And after they had to deal with parking and trying to get to Franklin Square, they said, this is unacceptable. Like, we don't know. They said, so the head of DRPA, he said, I had to park so far away and then try not to get hit by traffic. And we said, well, that was the point. Like, we wanted you to experience what we go through. So I put in the chat box just some of the things that, the links and articles that also Sarah helped publish. Check it out, but it's kind of shows the ways in which you can gather people to kind of organize and build consensus around what are the community needs, and make sure people understand that when it comes to, public policy, there's a saying, nothing about us without us. And that's certainly the case for Chinatown. Thanks, James.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. And the big take home for the group is that it's collective, right? So you all could lead an effort, but you have to remember you can't do it on your own. And I just wanted to show really quickly one last slide before we move into conversation. When you're working with the officials and groups, you could, Anna totally told you how she moved through this process. At first she was manipulated by PATCO saying, we're just going to do this and we're going to let you know about it. And there was no participation of community. But then Anna quickly realized what was happening and she forced the process to move upward, and she didn't allow Squilla to continue to placate her. She moved forward and turned Squilla into a partner, and then she turned the process on its head. And now she's hopefully, when we're through this pandemic and as the planning process picks back up, we have more citizen control over what happens at Franklin Square and PATCO. You want to move through this ladder to get to the top. And so Joshua, it's if you can't call Squilla, you can go call someone else in his office and talk their head off until they hear you, because they're going to say, I got this guy Josh from Chinatown. He's driving me nuts saying XYZ. and Squilla will respond. It really is that simple. So we have limited time, but we wanted to move to a part of the conversation where we get to hear from you. I know last session you were working on some brainstorming around where the power lies, and also around what some of your interests are, especially around the 800 Vine project. So we want to do a little more of that to think about those targets. Who are the decision makers, and what might those decision makers be looking for, and how can you understand their process, get in their head a little bit, and then figure out how to connect your interest to theirs so that they can see it's not their interests and your interests can be aligned, so that a policy can be crafted that is suitable for your community. All right. So there's a document that Anna shared with me, and I wanted to share it with the group. I gotta share my screen again. It's so far, any responses? I know you guys are lighting the chat box up, and that's wonderful. But sometimes it's good to say it out loud, because some people like me are slow to read the chat. So anything anyone wants to say? Anyone? How are you responding, to the process that Anna went through with pushing back on PATCO? Like, that really happened. And it happened last year, She made that guy walk several blocks so he can get the point.
Yeah, you could really see the whole, like the amount of work that needs to be done. Like it wasn't just last year. Like she spent like years building up this relationship with Squilla, which I feel like is so intimidating too by itself. But it's like even when you reach that point, it's also like you really have to like know, like I guess like the different levels and to galvanize. There's like so many parts like this, like the coalition building and like bringing people to the meetings and knowing about the meetings. And yeah, it's just like I get it, like it's accessible, but it's also really difficult.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but I don't want you to feel all the weight of that process, though. You take it piecemeal, right? You take it piecemeal, chunk by chunk, and you can start simply by learning, you know? Like, I don't know specifically what your interests are, but let's take 800 Vine, for example, right? And you know that the PRA is heavily involved in that process, right? And, you know, that's Greg Heller, that's Angel, and there's a land bank process. So what's happening with the land bank? You know, what kind of research are you doing on the land bank? You know, what kind of threads to start to pull on? You know that the land bank has been in the hot seat, right? And so South Philly with Kenyatta Johnson and Daryl Clark's got some articles with him collaborating with a developer. So you know that they're not really looking to get in the hot seat again. So they're going to make sure they do the fairest process possible for 800 Vine. And you're going to hold up, maybe not the article, but you're going to hold that point out. I know that you guys want to do the fairest possible process so that you don't get back in hot water. And I can help you as a resident do a fair process. You know what I mean? And so so if we were to look at the decision makers, right? We're just going to say Angel's on the list. And I'll try to share my screen again and just so Angel doesn't want to be, right? So his motivations is to make sure that he doesn't end up on news, you know, for giving some developer a sweetheart deal. And Josh is going to make sure that Angel remembers that. You know, he's going to, and through an email, hey, Angel, I know that you guys were having this process about this parcel before the pandemic. Where does it stand? It's just that simple. That kind of email, you know, or you know, they changed the rules about how they disperse the land or put the land out through their land bank process. How has it changed? You know, and you can even play dumb and say, Angel, I don't understand this process. Can you explain it to me more? You know? Yeah, love it.
And one thing I'll also add to that encouragement, James, is that, you know, while Anna took a really heavy responsibility upon herself in the Patco example, she also leveraged other power players in Chinatown, such as PCDC, who had existing relationships with Squilla. And part of my experience as a staff member there a few years ago, I remember, is constantly hearing these calls coming from Anna, you know, getting these emails from Anna about certain issues in the neighborhood. And part of the magic is that she knew we worked for her, we worked for the community, and she knew also that Squilla's office works for the community. So she doesn't necessarily need to be the person that's coordinating and creating relationships. As long as she can tip that lever, just send an email every once in a while to say, hey, what are you guys doing about this issue? That was enough to get some of us going in our office, and also enough for Squilla's office to start perking their heads up as well.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. So you have to find your role, right? Which role do you want to play? Do you want to be the person that is out front pushing? Do you want to be the person in the back nudging? Do you want to be the data guy? Just say, hey, did you see this? Hey, did you see this? Hey, did you see this? That doesn't make sense. You know, which role do you want to play? And you play it hard, right? And it could mean you never leave your house. It could mean you only show up at the community meeting once a month. You know?
Right. And Esther asks, I tend to work better with folks at the bottom rather than dealing with power players. What can I do? And I can really relate to that, Esther. You know, my support group is immigrants with disabilities and their families. A lot of them feel like I can't, you know, I don't feel comfortable speaking in my language at a public meeting, you know, or I don't really feel like I'm welcome in these public policy spaces. So some of the things that I do is I will explain to my group, here's the issue that we're having, and I'll ask for their input and I'll help formulate, their recommendations. So we actually created a petition that then got circulated and got over, I think, 350 signatures. So, and I made sure the petition was bilingual, and this is a strategy PCDC uses as well. But, in other community meetings that we held and organized together, we would say, Philip or Carol, can you find someone to come tell a story? And so at the community meetings, we had a family member say, well, I remember growing up, I wasn't allowed to go to Franklin Square Park. I would like for my grandchildren someday to be able to go play there and meet people from all over the city. That was an actual story that really moved the power players in the room.
And that could be your role. You could help to gather those stories behind the scenes, editing and writing it up. That's a very important process because it takes all that effort. And so, just like in the chat, Sarah responded, help them to align their priorities. You could be doing one-on-one work with residents, to help them to align their priorities and make sure that the petition says exactly what they want to say, right? And you don't have to be in front. That person who responds to that, your questions don't have to be in front, but you're still deliberately aiding the process, and that's the kind of work it takes. So, what might some other motivations be, or what other questions do we have?
Could I ask a clarification, Anna?
Yes.
Is the population, the people that you work with, are they residents of Chinatown mainly?
Yes, they're residents in Chinatown, but what we found out, so we do monthly workshops out of Chinese Christian Church and Center. But then once word spread out, we had people from all the surrounding counties and New Jersey. So these are folks who are really struggling because their schools or maybe their health system is not explaining to them what is autism and how to take care of your loved one. So we also help non-Asians as well. It became a sort of thing where people needed a place to learn safely and ask questions. And we've been providing that for 6 years with a lot of support from C4.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes, I get the connection. But you know what? I think for James, here's the thing that the players that we've been talking, or the stakeholders, or in this whole event, seems to be that the council people would probably listen to the people who are residents in the area, and I'm just kind of wondering because people who are like myself, who go to the church at Chinese Christian Church and Center, we are not residents in the area, but we are. So how much?
I want to tell you, Helen, that's a ploy. That's a trick.
Sorry?
Helen, that's a trick. They will listen to all stakeholders.
Okay.
You are a stakeholder.
So that's what I wanted to make clear, is that because the stakeholders are anybody who are not only the residents, but who uses Chinatown for a consistent basis. Is that what we're talking about?
I think you kind of need all of those folks, though, because there is a perception that Chinatown doesn't vote. So if you're November 2020 election, 800 or so people voted in the election. So elected officials do look at voter turnout. And if they feel like you're saying, well, all my residents want this, but then they don't show up and vote, they kind of get the message like, well, I can ignore these folks. For Franklin Square Patco, I actually got some of the McCall families who vote in high numbers to support us. That way we expand the perception of who are the voters and residents that are invested in what happens to this piece of land. And they were more than happy to join and support Chinatown's wishes.
Yeah, but see, that's a whole, the scenario is still with the residents, and the vote that counts are the residents' votes. And so in essence, I think maybe the strategies, when you incorporate all the groups, we're looking at people who are, I guess, consumers, or people who are who have businesses but not necessarily live in Chinatown. So I think the strategy has, it's not just, it's just like what you're saying, Anna, somewhere down the line, there's got to be a cooperation of all these groups that utilizes the space. And so how do we make this a place where everybody can live together in the way we want to? And it's because obviously Franklin Square it's a very prominent space that you don't want to lose.
That's right. And that was,
except crossing the street.
No, and you know what? To your point, Helen, you're absolutely right. One of the groups we tried to also enlist were people who support parks, public parks, and they are a powerful lobby. They are super organized, and but for some reason they were not helpful in this effort. So I actually reached out to the Environmental Protection Agency to get some of the environmental justice issues. And what I learned is that those powerful parks group, some of them have atrophied. They haven't really built up their membership,
Yeah.
and so over time they've lost their power. But to your point, we can say it's not just who lives closest to the park. It's actually who uses the park, who are the users.
Well, but then the other thing, to talk about Chinatown as a place where people don't vote, it's still a part of Philadelphia's heritage. Everyone loves Chinatown. You know what I mean? And so even if you can say that there are only 800 people voting it, if Chinatown gets depleted, marginalized, or loses any more footprint, the whole of Philadelphia feels that. And so you have the city at your back, And so how do you play to that in terms of, like you said, you use Chinatown, even though you don't live in Chinatown, you still come into Chinatown. And it's a major tourist hub, so to speak, for all sorts of things. So you can
I'll also share that, Helen, that a meeting that you and your husband Tim were in, I think a year and a half ago, about the proposed bids in the neighborhood. I thought you were very effective at that meeting and advocating for the community. I still remember the question that Tim asked about why the
Sarah, we can't hear you anymore.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right,
We ended at Tim's question.
Yes, Tim asked about the boundaries of the proposed neighborhood improvement district, the business improvement district, and it was really effective. And I think that the church that you guys represent, Chinese Christian Church, has been a powerful advocate for the community for a long time, and that people see the church's interests as very much, synonymous with the community's interests in many respects, and they really respect that kind of investment in the neighborhood. So I would encourage you to, to not pretend that you're a resident, but to say that as an advocate for Chinatown and as a member of its institutions, I have as much voice here and can be as powerful.
You absolutely do.
Goes
You
back
absolutely
to
have
what
as much voice.
Joshua and Shirley were saying about being guardians of our community. So you don't need to be a resident necessarily.
And it's and Helen, just so you know, it's happening all across the city where churches and people that are involved in the rec center, they don't live in the neighborhood, but they are guardians of the community. They grew up there, they worship there, they have a business there, and they care about that community. So they are stakeholders, and what they say is important. And so you have that right. You have that right.
I think this has been very helpful in terms of, I'm still muted. Am I muted still? Okay, all right. I think it's very helpful to understand that there has to be a lot of collaboration involved. And I think it sounds like to me the power players are not necessarily in the groups itself, but you have to collectively incorporate all these other groups that have this similar interest. I mean, the strongest preservation that we want to keep for Chinatown is heritage, okay? And I think part of that is that reaching out to heritage groups to stand behind you and to work with you makes a lot of sense to me, okay? in the green space people that, like you said, the environmental groups, that is huge. And on top of that, here's another thing too, AARP, okay? The seniors, the walkable spaces, living spaces that can come in, PCA and all that people that have this kind of, because we don't have these spaces, okay? We don't have, nobody can cross that to Franklin Square without really taking your life in at your own risk. So that those are all those, I think this is good because it expands our way of thinking about who we need to reach out to.
And the thing about it is that, so when you think about when you're reaching out, you're thinking about what their interests might be. And so, when you're thinking about, like, say, you talked a lot about AARP and walkability, that's the kind of feedback that Otis needs. They need to understand that, if you don't figure out Vine Street, you could have some real statistics. You could improve your statistics on the pedestrian scale and feel and walkability of Vine Street if you listen to us. We walk it every day. We live it every day. We can tell you how to improve these intersections. You can, and likewise, yeah. So I'll stop talking. But yes.
Well, that's very interesting because Josh actually, Josh, you were thinking about the same thing I was thinking. At the church corner at 11th in the Vine area, there have been so many accidents. I mean, literally, I've seen accidents happen right in front of our church. And there was a bus that ran into the church. And the biggest challenge was trying to get the city to do something about that. And the only thing they came up with is stop on red, which is not the best thing, but at least that was something. But maybe the problem was maybe we went to the different channel of reaching to the people. Maybe we need to talk to Otis. Oh, Simpson. I mean, Cadus, and not Otis, Casey and the other people.
Yeah, it's Casey, it's whoever's at the street department, and it's also a council person. You got to hit all three buttons.
Gotta hit them all.
Yeah.
Well, and one good development is, last week when PCDC AAU Councilmember Gim hosted a candlelit vigil, right? A WHYY reporter was there and recorded a video showing everyone crowded onto 10th Street Plaza, like over 100 people trying to social distance on the 10th Street Plaza. And the reporter said the Vine Street Expressway was going underneath. So I had, after the inauguration, I had tweeted the Department of Transportation to ask them to finish the work that they had extended to PCDC in 2016 in talking about should we cap the Vine Street Expressway. So this time I tweeted and I said, it's really a shame that, even in a time of grief and crisis, our community doesn't have a safe place to mourn. And so I tagged the Department of Transportation and Pete Buttigieg, the secretary of that agency. And I said, we need justice. So the next morning, he tweeted out that Philadelphia Chinatown used to be whole. And it's time to kind of make sure that our infrastructure projects look at the community's needs and wellness. And so I sent the tweet to our members of Congress. Congressmember Brendan Boyle then texted Pete Buttigieg to invite him to come to Chinatown. So this is, exciting. And I've talked with John Chin just to say, if we as Chinatown don't seize this opportunity, what's happening is, in response to Secretary Buttigieg's tweet, you see non-Asian folks talking about what they want to see if they cap the Vine Street Expressway. So we can't let that happen. We've got to really assert what our community needs. John is working with Representative Evans. So we're going to try to bring Pete Buttigieg here to hear from the community.
And Rep Evans is someone that will really be on the ground.
Yeah. Could you explain to me what you mean by capping?
So actually, to be honest, it's so amazing. They just capped parts of the Vine Street Expressway further down near the Free Library. They fixed it and they capped a little bit more to broaden that apron in front of the Free Library on the Parkway. So it's really like a cap. You take the
Have
highway,
you
you
seen
just,
that new park around in front of the Free Library, Helen? Like, have you gone
yes.
further west on Vine Street and seen like where the the statue is and where there's a lot of homeless folks that gather? They
Right.
capped over that. Used to be where the expressway was open to the air, but they put a cap on it and connected the two sides.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, that's exciting. If you can get the right people here. I think this is probably a good timing in terms of with all the, especially with the recent tragedy and all that, it's may sound like the most appropriate time for them to pay attention.
And you know, and Helen and Josh and Esther, the point, that picture, that image would not have happened if people didn't show up, right? So someone made the tweet and then someone connected the politician, but the people had to show up.
It's crazy. Like it's amazing. Like because I was there at the vigil on Wednesday night, right? And I remember thinking about like this is not socially distanced, right? And I was there for most of it. Like, I had to go at the end, but I was like, how are we gonna fit? And it's like, well, duh. Like I feel like I could have made that same. It's like, how did Anna like come up with this like insight and I didn't? Right? It's like why? Like I could have. I'm kind of upset at myself that I didn't think about it, but I'm also like, this is amazing. Like you came up with this and you tweeted it out and it's got action and now it's like in process. Totally on board. Totally on board.
Well, it's like, one of my mentors, Tom Perez, he was Deputy Assistant Attorney General at Department of Justice. He said, we're all a part of the same orchestra. We just play a different instrument. So I might be good at Twitter, but Philip Lai can get like 50 seniors to show up at a meeting and shame elected officials. Shirley can take down a neighborhood bid by Callow Hill residents. So all of us have a role to play. And, I think what the purpose of this presentation is, when we work together and figure out what are our strengths or are we comfortable with, every one of you brings assets to this movement. And we're really excited to, get connected and to work together on projects like 800 Vine.
Right, and it can start with, and what she did with that photo was she just pulled on a thread. She just
Exactly.
So,
and
I think, yeah,
to provide some history behind that one tweet, that tweet was part of decades of work to advocate around Vine Street Expressway, right? And that's all the background and the layers of different community advocates that are built up over time, from that picture of the crane that was showed earlier with the folks that were standing on top of the rubble to that tweet. There was so much effort in between that has never stopped about Vine Street and the ways that the government has impacted our community. And so I just want to encourage you all as we close out today's workshop that it's not that you all are heroes doing this by yourself or even over one project with a coalition, but that it is really about generations of organizing and that you have a lot of people that have gone on before you. And I think especially, when Shirley Moy, you were talking about your father in PCDC, I think so much about him and all the efforts that have been built up over the foundation that he created.
That's right. And I just wanted to mention too, I replied to Secretary Buttigieg's tweet with a link to PCDC's video from 2018 because I saw all those other white folks tweeting about they wanted to build like a big urban playground on the cap. So I said, well, wait, here is what the residents actually, what they went through to save their community. This is actually what they want, just to kind of put people in check. And now that video has been watched by more people. So it's definitely, we're building on the work that, Cecilia, George, all these other folks, we stand on the shoulders of giants. And thank you, James, for doing this presentation to kind of teach us, lessons learned from other communities that have fought similar battles.
Thank you, James and Anna, for that amazing presentation and engagement. As we're closing out today, the last few minutes, I just wanted to take this chance, since we're at the midpoint of our Champions kind of program, I guess, to do a little exercise together to think about where we started and where we are now, and some of the changes that have happened and how we understand community and how we understand our role in affecting change. And so it's a very simple exercise, and it's called I used to think, but now I think. And so for those of you who are interested in responding, you say something that you used to think at the beginning of this, our time together, so back in September when we first met, and replace that with something that you think now instead. So I'll give you all a minute to think about what that might be, and whoever is ready and interested in sharing, please go ahead and say so. I'm going to read out loud Esther's statement. I used to think getting folks in Chinatown to work together would be close to impossible, but now I think there's possibility. Well, that's hopeful. Thanks, Esther.
Can we just say it without writing? Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay. I used to think, as a person who comes in to Chinatown, but not a resident, really didn't have a voice. But now I think that when we combine our voices, it becomes loud, and it becomes, it's definitely, that voice has to be directed to the right ear to hear us. And I think that's it. So I think, it's like the possibility of not working together and all that, is that somewhere down the line, I think, is to collect all the right voices and to make a really loud noise.
See a lot of nodding heads. Thank you, Helen. I'm going to read Shirley Moy's chat. I used to think it's challenging to make new connections during COVID-19, but now I think I made deeper connections with folks in these discussions. Oh, that's great to hear, Shirley.
So I used to think that Chinatown as a community didn't have a voice, or have anything with what it, as part of Philadelphia. Now I think there is a chance I see more involvement with city and stuff. I didn't think of that used to be that way in the past.
I'm going to read Josh's comment. I used to think my constant reading and anxiety around local news articles was a waste of time and wouldn't lead to anything. But now I know there can be a purpose and can lead to tangible change, even if slow. Thanks, Josh.
I'll just keep the ball moving. I used to think that being a policy advocate and achieving change was like catching lightning in a bottle, like one and done. But my experience has been that it's once you do it once, people are looking for you to help them with other changes.
I also wanted to welcome PCDC staff if you're interested in sharing.
I'm thinking.
While you're thinking, I hope you don't mind, Mr. Phil. I just want to pull you out a little bit. A friend of mine was really helpful in helping me to fight for justice in my child's school. And she was an older person and very quiet, but she helped me to understand all the parents because she knew the legacies of all the families that went to the school. And she helped me to know each parent, each kid, their cousins, their uncles. And she allowed me the ability to connect to all the different folks. And so your wisdom and knowing people, it can open doors.
This whole thing taught me a whole lot. You know, like, can you hear me? Chinatown, to a lot of folks, its existence is purely because the tourists need it, the city needs it. But now we look at it as a community. People live in it, they work in it. And all these Asian folks, Chinese, or they come back to it for their tradition, for their connections. For our community, we need Chinatown. So, I mean, Asians in this society has been, I'm sorry to say that, has been ignored, has been trivialized. No matter how successful the individual can be, when he walks on the street, to a lot of other folks, he's not important, he's ignored. So in a way, the Atlanta case tells us that, you know, whatever the guy did, he blamed it on somebody else. Asians are easy to get blamed on. And a lot of, you know, I work with seniors. They love Chinatown. They come back to Chinatown. Some of them could be very frail in a way, that they still walk and take the bus back to Chinatown. It's an important part of our life. We need to maintain it. Anna set a very good example. I mean, I don't think the politicians, the people in power would listen to us. She did it. She did it. Thank you, Anna, to set this example.
No, and for folks who don't know, if seniors are getting vaccinated, it's because of Philip. and Cecilia. But, you know, Philip has repeatedly persisted not just to take care of Chinese seniors living in affordable housing, but seniors all over the city. And it's because of Philip's persistent voice showing up at city meetings, raising this repeatedly, that hundreds and hundreds of seniors are finally getting vaccinated because he brought to the attention that the folks he knows were not getting vaccinated. Meanwhile, these pharmacies were vaccinating wealthy white people in condos. So, Philip, you know, you have literally saved lives by showing up, speaking the truth, not being afraid, and then being persistent and wearing down the city. So, you're my hero, Philip.
Thank you. Thank you. That's my job. I see the misery. I see the need. So I just spoke out. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Philip. I'm glad James pulled you out into the open. I want to read Margot's comment. She said, I used to think it is hard to get community members to care about neighborhood issues. Now I see hopes from all of you who really care and work hard to learn how to make your voices heard and how to make change. Thank you, Margot. It means a lot. Anyone else want to respond to this prompt? You have another minute.
I can share. So I used to think Cecilia and George were so powerful when our community is more like homogeneous, and as our community become more diversified, we have more people from different backgrounds, speak different language. I thought now it's harder to unite everybody. We might not be as powerful as them. But now I think if we work hard, there's still a chance we can unite everyone and form even bigger coalition.
Thanks. Yeah, that's so good to hear.
Can I just ask a question on that one? Do we reach out to these new residents? They're not.
We do provide services to them. And I would say that we have less interaction with them on, like, for example, planning issues. And we engage more English speaking second generation folks. And I think with all of you who have the language ability, we're hoping that we can reach out to more of those folks.
This is, I'm talking about the new people who come into Chinatown, the ones who are basically not necessarily Asians. Do we?
You mean the new residents who
New
rent
residents.
here, like students?
Yes. Students or owners of these properties?
Yeah, that hasn't been a focus before.
The reason I was thinking about that is that it seems like that, you know, owners and new residents, or, well, especially owners, if they were educated or if they were exposed to the heritage of Chinatown and to the idea of preserving Chinatown as a place that is valuable to them for their property, right? But also because of the rich history that it has. I think that's one way of bringing these owners into the group. They can help be a part of that voice that we were talking about.
You know, Helen, that's such a good point. And I know that the walking tours that PCDC organized, allowed me a way to share this event with McCall Elementary School families who live in Society Hill, Washington Square West, and Old City. And we had encouraged them to participate, to say, over half the school is our Chinatown residents, and it's really important for you to learn about other school community members' history and issues and heritage. And so I would say PCDC, through activities like night market, through the walking tours, through organizing community meetings and inviting everyone, has really created a space for those connections for new people to become educated.
Thanks, Anna. And we actually, our next topic is storytelling. So it's really fitting. And yeah, storytelling is definitely a very important component and a way to engage more people to buy in our cause.
So it sounds like we have everybody that spoke that wanted to speak, and just thank you all for sharing what you did, and a lot of very powerful thoughts and reflections on some changes in minds and hearts over these last few months, and looking forward to continuing on this journey with you all, even past this formal Champions program. One thing I want to make sure we put in our calendars before we disperse tonight is to continue this campaign planning exercise that we've been going through. I know that a couple of us were able to meet separately about 2 weeks ago to go through 800 Vine and continue that campaign plan that Michaela led us in, and that there's interest in doing that still. As well as in making sure that we actually implement and work together around those goals. So you're all welcome to participate in those meetings if you're able to, and if you have the interest. And I just wanted to put out there if folks wanted to meet in the next week or two. I know, yeah, you'll be on vacation, but it seems like there was some great momentum from our last conversation. And so I just wanted to put that out there. If folks are still interested, to maybe if you could put a thumbs up, and we'll find a time over email.
Sarah, which meeting is this now? Is this the champion meeting, or is that the other meeting that you guys had?
So this is the other meeting outside of these like more formal topical workshops. So we started a planning exercise, the last workshop with Michaela, around, who are the people in our network, and then what are our goals that we want to have with them. So we met separately about 2 weeks ago to talk about setting goals for 800 Vine. And so So what I'm offering is another chance to continue that conversation for those that have the interest. And that can happen in the next week or so. I just wanted to confirm that interest.
Is that the same meeting that Melody sent out like?
Yes, the survey, the draft survey, exactly.
Okay. All right.
And just to bring everybody up to date, since I know not everybody has been at all the meetings, 800 Vine is this opportunity to be thinking about how the community wants to use that parcel, that big city block at the corner of 8th and Vine that's been used as the parking lot. And so we've been using the planning exercise, as a way to think about what this group could do around that issue, and around some specific goals that we might set. And so the survey came out of a desire to be better understanding what community members want to see on that parcel. So you're welcome to join us, even if you weren't at the one previous meeting. We'll catch everybody up, or we can just see you next time for the storytelling session as well. I see a question from Esther about if Melody is leading the survey effort.
Yeah. Thanks, Melody. So these efforts are encouraged to be led by folks like Melody, everybody in this group, but PCDC is supporting as they're able to and want to make sure that this is really driven by your interests. That's the intent here.
I want to thank folks that have like responded to the survey, and I will make those changes. And then like at my next meeting, hopefully I'll have it translated with Chinese with it. And then we could figure out what's the next step of making it live on, at least online. And then also I would like to have a collective conversation about, do we want to continue with the survey? Is it that something that is, do we need the data? Or is it something that we don't feel like it's something that we need? And so, but back to Sarah's point is like, oh, are we trying to set a date now, or are we just getting a thumbs up about who wants to still be at this meeting? Just to clarify.
I was just hoping to get a thumbs up so that we could set something over email. Does that make sense, Margot and Yue? Since I know we're at time.
Yeah, I think so.
Great. So I'm seeing a lot of interest. So we'll continue that conversation. Okay, anything else for the good of the collective? If not, I was about to ask Melody to do that weird foo-foo theater thing.
Thank you. Like in the future, you will understand that when we do this, you will all like do this with me. It's like, you know, it's that beckoning cat in every Chinese restaurant. Okay, thank you everybody for being here. Let's take a collective breath. 1, 2, 3. Give yourself a hug. Oh. Thank you everybody for being in this room and sharing this space with us.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you all. Have a wonderful night.
Bye, Jane.
I know.
Bye.
It's such a long time.
I know. Bye.
Bye.